Good day, everyone. Thanks for joining us on Northwest Access TV. I'm Richard Cowperthwait. This will be our second show today. Again, we're interviewing at least most of the legislative candidates in Franklin County, those with contested races. And I'll just give you the rest of our schedule. Tomorrow morning, we'll flip over to the state treasurer's race. Carolyn Brannigan, a Georgia Republican running for state treasurer. Be interviewing her tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, again, live right here on channel 1089. And more legislators coming up Wednesday afternoon, 5 to 6, the candidates in the Swanton-Sheldon House District. And also, we have another show a week from today with the state Senate candidates. That'll be from 6 to 7 p.m. 1 week from today. So again, thanks for watching us on channel 1089. And again, if you happen to be watching us live, well, I guess you know it's a live show. We're interviewing 3 of the 4 candidates running in the Franklin-5 House District. That's a big district. 2-member district covering Highgate, Franklin, Berkshire, and Richford. And happy to have 3 of the 4 candidates on the ballot. We have Democratic Representative Sharon Fagard of Berkshire. Sharon, good to see you. Thanks for coming on. Republican Representative Lisa Hango of Berkshire. Lisa, welcome.
Thank you.
And Daniel Nadeau, a Highgate Republican, who's no stranger to these airwaves, who's run, I guess, Daniel, your fourth bid for the Vermont House from the Highgate area.
Third is a Democrat, not a Republican.
3 is a Democrat, 1 is a progressive, and running as a Democrat this time.
Yeah.
And I should note at the outset, there's a 4th candidate on the ballot, 4th candidate in the race, and that's Paul Martin. In fact, I think I might have been hooking him to Highgate. Paul Martin, a Franklin Republican. And again, he was invited. He had a business I guess conflict today, so couldn't make it. But Paul Martin, a Franklin Republican, is running. And Lisa, that's kind of an interesting story. When I mentioned off air, when I went up to get the Highgate ballot from Town Clerk Wendy Dusablon a couple weeks ago, I was fully expecting to see the name of Brian Rowell as a Highgate Republican, as the 2nd Republican candidate. And lo and behold, there was Paul Martin in front of me. So I guess Brian got enough Republican write-in votes to get the 2nd Republican nomination, but then declined the nomination. And I guess the committee from the 4 towns Republican committee met and nominated Paul Martin, and he's now the other Republican candidate.
That's correct.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Daniel, let's start with yourself. The 3rd time wasn't the charm. You're hoping the 4th time will be the charm. You're no stranger to running for office. You think this time might be different, or what do you think?
Hey, 2020 has been a wild year, if anyone can tell you that. I mean, we started the year off with, worldwide fires, and we got COVID and everything, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah. So was it an easy decision to run again, or did you have to think about it for a long time?
It's always been it's always fun to run. It's always fun to get out there, even with the social distancing. I've been doing a lot of outreach online. It's just a different campaign this time around.
I bet. Did you think about being DNP? Did you think about trying to get the progressive nomination as well?
Not really. The progressives kind of had a little of an issue this year, with that one candidate taking up a lot of their higher positions. So I just didn't want to get involved with that.
Yeah. Anyway, so a Democratic candidate. Lisa Hango. Lisa, you're an incumbent, but you're also running for the first time, seeking your first election. And again, talked to you and Charen maybe a couple months ago, but that was a case where Joshua Aldrich had been elected, seemingly headed down to Montpelier, only to bow out. Mm-hmm. And at that point, I guess what the same committee we talked about for Paul Martin, just a district Republican committee met, and you got the nod, and Governor Scott appointed you. But you served pretty much for the whole 2-year session almost, correct?
That's correct. I came in 6 weeks into the session, the first year of the session.
Yeah. Anyway, so again, easy decision to run for your first full term?
Yes, it really was. I had no idea how I was going to feel about it, but after the pandemic, I feel like an incumbent is really experienced in what's happening and how the state government is working. So I feel like that I'd like to keep that momentum going. So it was a very easy decision for me to run again.
And I guess I should back up, and I'll go back to Daniel too. Give us some background for folks who may not be too familiar with you. I know you're still on the Berkshire School Board these days.
That's correct. So
give us some background about yourself.
Sure. I live in Berkshire, and I have been on either the Berkshire School Board or the new combined district school board, which is Northern Mountain Valley Union School Board.
And that's, of course, the operative school board these days,
That's correct. So combined between the two of them, this is my 10th year on the board. I also serve on the board of the Franklin County Home Health Agency, and this is about my 7th year. I've lost track, unfortunately, of that.
Jana McCarthy's still in the good hands of Jana McCarthy, I
Yes,
trust?
absolutely. She's the executive director, and I believe she just celebrated her 31st anniversary
Really?
as such. Yeah.
Wow, that's quite that's a
It
long
is,
run.
and we're really happy for that continued leadership.
Yeah.
The consistency is really important.
Yeah, Janet's one of my favorite people around here.
Mine also. I'm also on the Northwestern Medical Center Board of Incorporators
Wow.
and the Rise Vermont Executive Committee. I have,
I'm glad you find some time to be a legislator.
fortunately, well, I guess the silver lining to COVID is that we're doing our meetings on the computer, and I'm able to attend a lot of the meetings that I wouldn't ordinarily be able to attend if I'm down in Montpelier. So that's been great for me, particularly being at home, that I can turn on my computer and go to just about a meeting every night if I really wish to. So that's been helpful.
And these meetings are pretty much, are they still largely Zoom meetings these days? Are you
Yes.
getting back to some in-person meetings?
A couple. There are a couple of select boards in our district who are meeting in person, and some of them have the option that if you don't want to go in person, you can meet by Zoom as well. And some are still strictly Zoom, like my school board meetings are all by Zoom.
Right. Let's get over. I don't want to ignore Representative Fegard here. Sharon heading trying for a second term. So I guess there was enough positive, maybe a lot positive in the first term, as strange as it's been. Easy decision to run for another term?
Well,
Or not so easy?
It's a remarkable commitment. Basically, it's a life of meetings and research.
Yeah.
I feel like I was very fortunate to be on the Ag and Forestry Committee with impeccable leadership and
Who's the chair? Who's the chair of that committee?
Chair is Carolyn Partridge, who's served in the House for about 20 years now, but just did a tremendous job of team building. And literally, when we would hear from a couple people in testimony about a topic, would say, so we've heard from the people who love this. Who would hate it? We need to hear from them. And that garners a lot of respect across all party lines, being committed to research topics thoroughly. So everything that came out of our committee had a unanimous vote of support.
Really?
Yeah.
And give us a little background on yourself also.
Okay, well, we have a homestead farm with sheep and eggs. Not so many eggs these days because the daylight hours have gotten shorter, but
Oh, so that affects egg production big time?
absolutely. That is the primary driver, how many
really?
daylight hours they have.
Really?
I am on the board of the Northwest Solid Waste District. The
In fact, I've got my bucket out by my house in St. Albans City today. I really appreciate their food scraps initiative. I've
Yeah.
taken good advantage of that.
Yeah, it's been interesting. I haven't been on that board very long,
Oh, yeah.
but I've been in the world of recycling and waste for a long time now. COVID cut into the work that I've done as a volunteer on a restorative justice panel in Richford, and I'm a member of the Berkshire Elementary School's Farm to School. And in fact, I was shoveling a bunch of sheep manure and bedding this morning, or this afternoon, into a truck.
Out of curiosity, a question I've never thought to ask this question before, is sheep manure, in terms of manure, is that better than cow manure or other manures? Are there better grades of manure out there?
I would say sheep, goat, or cow would all be lovely. Horse manure is a little more challenging because the weed seeds get through, and so your manure can bring in seeds for things you don't want growing in your garden. But it's all good as long as it's aged and processed.
Oh, thanks. That's
Yeah.
something that hasn't come up before on this
Yeah.
show.
You just don't want it to be hot when you put it down, especially
All right.
chicken manure.
No, really.
Yeah.
Interesting. Daniel Beck, give us some background. I know Scampers, you're still a Scampers store guy in Swanton, correct?
Yep, my family still owns and operates Scampers. Some nice new updates have been, I finally paid off my college debt, so that's always a good plus.
Great.
I won the position of Highgate Town Chair for the Democratic Party, so I've been starting to get some of that bureaucratic and meetings and that kind of policy skills.
Did you have to fight for that job out of curiosity?
Yes, I did.
My guess is there weren't a ton of people going for it, or am I wrong?
Hey, Highgate's a very democratically strong town. We helped. I helped write the Vermont platform this year, so that was interesting. We voted on amendments, and so that's basically my bit.
Well, while we're on the subject, can I assume you're backing Lieutenant Governor David Zuckerman in his bid for governor?
Yep.
And also Molly Gray for her bid for lieutenant governor?
Yep.
Very good. At least might as well cover that ground. Take a wild guess that you're supporting Governor Phil Scott and Scott Mill for lieutenant governor, Scott for governor?
Yes, I am. Between the two of them, they're both very sensible businessmen, and that's what I appreciate about their ability to lead the state.
Yeah. Charen, back to you. Are you backing the demos in the top two positions, or what can you tell us about that?
Mixed bag.
Yeah?
Mixed bag. No, I feel that the quality of material that crosses the governor's desk has to reach a higher bar if that governor might veto it. So I like having, because we have the majority in the House and the Senate, and because I think that Phil Scott is a solid businessman, I like having him as governor.
So you're supporting Phil Scott?
I am.
But Molly Gray for lieutenant governor?
Yes.
Were you surprised? That was at least considered, I guess, a mild upset with Molly Gray defeating pretty easily Tim Ash, the Senate President Pro Tem, and other folks. Were you surprised at that at all, or not?
I'm not a big political, I'm not a political insider in that way, so I can't say. My attention has been on the work in my committee and the work in the House.
Yeah.
So I haven't been paying attention to who's more popular.
Yeah.
That's just not, that just hasn't been where my attention's been.
Sure, I understand. Daniel, what about yourself? Were you surprised that Molly Gray easily got the nomination for lieutenant governor over Tim Ash and other candidates? Did you follow?
In any other year, any system, I might have been, but 2016, 2020, anything can happen. Sometimes they just, the voters go where they're going to go.
Yeah. So what's the biggest issue? Obviously, the pandemic's been going on, for a good half year or so. Is there any kind of dominant issue that you're running across as people talk about your...
Oh, it's for a lot of the rural areas, it's the pandemic, it's school, it's how are we going to get through this, it's, how long is this going to go on? Should I wear a mask? Shouldn't I wear a mask? And it varies on what crowd you're talking to and what group you're talking to and what their beliefs are, because unfortunately it's a very big split nowadays, but...
Yeah. Well, Lisa, the session finally wrapped up. I'm hearing it was maybe the latest legislative session in Vermont history even.
I think the longest as well.
Of course, the big budget bill was passed with, I'm told, apparently only just several, I guess, Republicans, just a few legislators voting against it. You voted for it, I assume?
That's
Were you
correct.
comfortable with it?
Yes, I am.
And that covers, the last 9 months of this fiscal year
That's correct.
2021?
And the actual budget bill that we passed was actually a full year budget, but we had passed the first 3 months already.
Right. Boy, I'm hearing that the next, and I'm sure this year has been difficult being a legislator with the craziness with the pandemic, but I'm hearing from a number of legislators and others that your next budget, should you return to Montpelier, the budget for fiscal 2022 may be just, I realize, down the road and probably hard to say, but maybe very difficult. Is that kind of the early sense?
That's what we're hearing, that there are going to be many difficult decisions to make. And of course, the revenue, we have no idea how we're going to end up in terms of revenue, because there were some one-time monies that were used this year. So that made it a little bit easier to not make any cuts, any substantial cuts, I should say. There were some minor cuts made. But yes, we're really looking ahead to 2022 and not knowing what we're going to see. And that in itself makes me feel like people who have experience, who have been through this all along, will be better situated to make that budget, to craft the budget. And I'm really hoping that there will be people there who understand the intricacies of it.
And again, so much uncertainty now, I mean, especially with how much help you get from the federal government.
And that's correct, because we can hope for everything that we can get, but we really don't know what we're going to get.
Sharon, the budget, you supported the budget?
I did. In fact, what I have seen so far in my short tenure has been that the budgets are so very carefully crafted that they are supported by everybody except for perhaps a handful of protest votes by progressives.
So was it progressives who voted, the few votes against it were?
Yes, they didn't feel like it did enough to level the playing field between the haves and the have-nots, which is the difference between the economy of Vermont and what wealth means here compared to perhaps New York State is quite different. And we benefited tremendously with our COVID dollars from the Fed. Some states received about $300 per capita, and we received about $2,000 per capita because of the small state minimum. So I think we have really been blessed with that, and I expect that as the second wave comes, that it's going to be interesting to see what the federal government chooses to do to support state economies and state governments.
But the next budget, I mean, I guess everybody, you folks are obviously hearing this for the fiscal 2022 budgets. Sounds like it could be just very difficult.
Yes, it's not good. It's not easy to begin with.
Yeah.
It's going to be that much harder. I suspect what we're going to see is a narrowing and prioritizing, but, you know, the programs that we have don't exist because somebody, thought that Tinkerbell would, would value it. It's because, children and families and hunger and transportation and so many of these issues that provide the infrastructure and the support to help build the future of Vermont and take care of business right now rely on the government to perform certain duties.
Yeah. Higher taxes. Most politicians, you don't hear too many people saying, yeah, we're going to have to go higher taxes. Does that remain to be seen, or you're hoping to stay away from that? The governor certainly makes it abundantly clear that's not the way he wants to go.
The middle class for the last 20 years has been getting squeezed harder and harder. And at the national level, there's been a failure in tax policy for decades now. So what we can do is pretty limited, and it's going to be hard. I don't have a magic ball, a magic crystal ball, so we're going to see what it looks like, and because each of us is only one of 150, we're all cogs in a machine.
Yeah.
If you were asking me if I was queen what I would do, I might have different answers.
Yeah. Not queen at this point.
No, not even in my own house.
Yeah. Daniel, I mean, what a difficult year. In the past, have you done a lot or some door-to-door campaigning? And are you doing none of that? This campaign, I assume, has played out differently than past campaigns for you?
Most of this campaign this year has been now is either live streaming on Facebook, live streaming on Twitch, sitting waves, putting out signs, doing mailers. Yeah. Unfortunately, a lot of the campaigning we used to do at, the events, the fairs, the festivals, very, but all that's, been obliterated. So, it's made getting to voters a lot more difficult this year. But I have faith that the signs and the advertisements and stuff will cover it.
Yeah. So what are your main selling points? Are there particular issues, any particular things you're stressing and trying to get elected?
Sorry. there were a couple of issues that we pushed really hard in the platform, such as police reform. Maybe out in Highgate that might not be as too bad, but there are certain areas of Vermont that have really been struggling with it. St. Albans, Burlington. Also the cannabis, I'd like to push for that once that becomes.
So you're happy to see that bill? You're happy to see that initiative getting some attention in the legislature?
Yeah, unfortunately it got voted down, but I'd like to see it get through.
In fact, did it get voted down, or has the governor made a decision on that bill?
No, the governor has not made a decision. It's on his desk.
Boy, that decision's got to come pretty soon, I think.
Yes, I believe he said he had until Wednesday to make a decision on a couple of bills, and that was one of them.
Okay, but there were a couple bills that were passed, correct?
Yes, we did.
Okay.
Yes, we did pass the bill.
And again,
But
with your opposition or not?
Yes, with my opposition.
On both bills?
S-54, which is the tax and regulate bill.
Yeah.
Yes, that was the main bill. I opposed that bill because I really, I fear for our youth, and I just really, I really feel that the advertising that's allowed by this bill is not setting a good example. It's not what Vermont stands for in my mind. And that was, in fact, a deal breaker for a number of Republicans who were going to vote for the bill. So that was one of the main things, and public safety is the other. We have so much trouble with opioid addiction and other addictions now, and violence, that I just don't want to add to it. And I truly believe that going down this route, the amount of money we're going to make in revenue from tax and regulate is not going to be enough to cover the money we're going to have to expend for those programs for youth and for offenders and for addiction.
I know Senator Randy Brock, in an interview I did with Senator Brock and Senator Parent maybe a couple months ago, Senator Brock seems convinced at the time anyway that it might be a money loser. He doesn't see this even having a plus side on money. Given the fact that Vermont passed the earlier law, which a lot of folks kind of, seem to think was kind of strange, that's, legalizing a small amount of marijuana, but you can't legally buy it. Given the fact that Vermont passed the earlier law, which you may well have opposed, did it make some sense to try to go beyond that, or you just would like it to go no farther than it's already gone?
And that was the argument for voting
Sure.
for this,
Right.
is that we've already got the legalization of a small
Right.
amount, so why not go
Why stop
farther,
there?
and why not make some money off from it?
Yeah.
And I agree with your last statement, which is not to go any farther.
All right, that's right. Yeah, Daniel?
I actually have the big reason I want to push this is because my sister actually has lupus, so she suffers from chronic issues that she has to medically have marijuana and all that.
Right.
And this bill would allow her to more easily get it. She wouldn't have to jump through hoops. She wouldn't have to feel that kind of social,
Although,
Pushback.
correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't medicinal marijuana, hasn't that been on the books for a while? But
Yeah, I know, but
not
this
as
is
easy as it
continuing
should be?
going further. If you can buy it from any place, you don't have to jump through hoops. It's not on your, it's not on your record. You know.
Does that issue come up much when you're talking to voters out there? Do many people mention that issue?
Marijuana or
About
medical
the
marijuana
marijuana issue.
in general?
Yeah, just, the taxing and regulating do.
Oh, they don't really. They just want it to be legal. They don't mind. That's getting into the weeds for most people.
Yeah. Sharon, how'd you come down on the issue?
Well, it's such a complex issue that I basically took a poll of voters. I reached out many times. I was disappointed to only get about 150 replies, and I had
From people in your district?
from my constituents, and I had a 6-point-some-odd% lead on the no's, and so I just did direct representation on that. I wish I'd heard from 1,000 people, but part of the challenge is that in some of the states that have done tax and regulate, it has driven down the market price on cannabis. It's cut the profits on the black market down, but when that goes down, then what they can charge at a retail establishment goes down, and then in order to maintain the same income, they would have to sell more of it. And I don't think that our goal is to have people consuming more cannabis. And at the same time, I know very clearly there are people whose lives are sort of a train wreck because they're habitually using cannabis in states where it's illegal in every form.
Yeah.
So it's a tremendously complicated issue. And
Have you got
And so I
some,
just-
if it does pass, have you got some hope that it could generate some significant revenue for the state, or does that seem dubious?
I think that it will generate some, but it's not, I don't believe it's going to be a windfall, in part because it's already legal to grow for personal use,
Right.
to gift to your friends. We've already driven down the black market price. From what I've heard, a high-quality ounce used to be $400, and now it's about $200. So we've already cut that in half, and I think we're going to come in and find that it is not a silver bullet for our economy. And I do agree with Representative Hango about her concerns for advertising. The Senate added that back in. When it left the House, there was no advertising allowed other than just the name on above your store, and there'd be a registry that's kept by the state. So if people were looking for it, they could find it.
Yeah. Another issue, the Global Warming Solutions Act, getting a lot of attention. Legislature passed it, governor vetoed it, but didn't come close to being able to have his veto sustained. You supported that, or
I did support it.
was that an easy vote? It's an issue that got a fair amount of attention.
It was, why couldn't you have asked about S-119? I'm having a little bit of a brain glitch right now, but it was, once I went through the bill, I felt comfortable supporting it, in part knowing that, we have boards or councils for a lot of different issues throughout the broad spectrum of things that the state looks at and weighs in on. And that what I think is going to happen is we're going to determine that the Paris Climate Accord is more ambitious than we can actually do. And I think that our goals are going to be scaled back a bit.
Yeah.
But one of the things I really like about it is that every day our forests in Vermont absorb about 50% of our carbon emissions. And we have a lot of opportunities to look at ecosystem services, to start recognizing agricultural practices that are benefiting our soil, which is a tremendous carbon sink, and also to support not just ag, but our forest products economy, because working forests are a great way to maintain forests so that plots are not sold off and sold to developers, so that we have a bunch of vinyl-sided homes replacing forests. It's good for the climate, it's good for hunting, it's good for ecosystems.
Representative Hango, you went the other way on that bill, correct?
I did, and I wish I could feel as confident as Representative Fegard that the goals are going to be adjusted. I don't. I think they're tremendously ambitious, and I'm concerned. I'm concerned with the ability of any citizen to be able to sue the government, regardless of the fact of whether they can get a monetary award or not, which they cannot. It's still going to be an extremely costly process. Anything that goes through the courts is a costly process. So that concerns me. It also concerns me that the legislature was willing to give up any responsibility for making rules around how we're going to achieve these benchmarks, and took the control from any control that the executive branch had out of their hands as well, which they did not agree to, and that's why the governor vetoed this particular bill. So all around, I think it's a terrible bill. I really disagree with it. I'm certainly not disagreeing with the fact that there is climate change. That is an acknowledgement that we've all made. And I have not heard anybody in recent months say, oh no, there's no such thing as climate change. I think those ideas are passé. Everyone acknowledges that yes, there is, but we're not able to come together and find a path forward to a solution. And this bill, titled the Global Warming Solutions Act, really didn't have any solutions. It just set up a council, which is quite cumbersome in the number of people that are on it. I believe it's 23 people. And that's a hard number to work with. And there are no rules for it to really follow. They're going to make their own rules that we then as citizens are going to have to decide on our usage and our emissions, how to achieve those goals. So I do object to the whole process.
Obviously, some Republicans voted for it. Governor didn't come really close to having his veto sustained. Were you surprised he didn't fare better after he vetoed it, or was it pretty clear how that was going to come down?
To my knowledge, all Republicans in the House voted to sustain his veto, and we had a few Democrats who also voted with us to sustain the veto. But, you know, there's such a big disparity. There are only 43 Republicans in the House, and the other 107 representatives are Democrats or progressives.
And
So
what's
it's
the
very
Senate? Just
hard for us
seven
to...
Republicans in the Senate, I think. Just 7
6, I
Republicans in the Senate.
believe.
7 or 8 or
6,
something.
yeah.
Yeah, you felt Republicans are certainly outnumbered. Daniel, was that a bill you would have backed?
Absolutely. I don't know how in 2020 you could even say, oh, well, just a couple months ago we were debating whether climate change is real. Like, California's been a desert for 40 weeks. Like, it's a joke that it took this long to get there to that consensus to start with.
Could I add
Yeah,
something?
you want to jump in, Sharon?
Yeah, so Moody's Credit Rating Service and other companies that assess risk and some insurance companies are all beginning to, when they look at states, consider whether states have at least climate mitigation, climate impact mitigation plans. And that's part of what this bill is going to force, so that we've got policy and action plans. And some of what we might see at a federal level, for instance, is if you have a plan in your town that prohibits any new construction in areas within a 100-year flood zone, then you get a bigger reimbursement percentage of FEMA if/when disaster does strike. In that same way, there's a benefit because Moody's is starting to weigh what states have in place, and that rating will impact the interest rate that states are paying. And unfortunately, we do have debt. We say we have it's an interesting thing that we have debt, yet we say we pass a level budget. Yeah.
Let me jump into Act 250 again. Seems to be Governor Nadeau saying he was disappointed with what came out of the legislature. I guess seems like every election forever around here, one hears about streamlining the permitting process, Vermont being too anti-business as far as some people are concerned, but sounds like a very watered down Act 250 bill that finally emerged. Are you not happy
Right.
with what finally came out?
So the original bill that came to the floor in the House was not, I would say, was not floor ready. There were things that clearly had not been explored in depth in the way that they would have been under the leadership of my committee. And what came back from the Senate because of COVID, instead of a feast of different topics covered, was limited to 2. So it was a sandwich. And I don't understand why people are attached to an idea of this one bill taking care of all the issues with Act 250, but there were several people who really wanted to do all or nothing. And that may be more glamorous, but doing it one bite at a time is okay. And, the permitting process for recreational trails is something that we need. And I'm wondering if in some ways it was scaled so that the streamlining of permitting in village centers and designated industrial is being held back as a leverage for something else that they will want to attach to it. But
So did you support what did come out?
I did support it,
Yeah.
and I'm not particularly attached to its future. I feel like, that language is there and will be resurrected from the dead during the next biennium, and hopefully the amount of research will be impeccable.
Yeah. Representative Hango, the Act 250 bill?
Yeah, that was H 926, and I opposed it. I'm part of the Rural Economic Development Working Group Caucus, and we had quite a discussion at the very end of the session about this, because there were a number of people, as Representative Fegard said, who really wanted to just pass this bill with its 2 sections, and there were a number of people who wanted the whole Act 250 reform to pass. I must say that I am extremely disappointed that after over 2 years of work, because this happened before the last biennium even started, after 2 years plus of work, this was all that they could come up with. I feel like it was a tremendous waste of taxpayer money to work on this bill. I know other members of the Committee of Jurisdiction, that's Natural Resources, Fish and Wildlife, and they really, for a long time, didn't even discuss any other bills. This was their primary focus in that biennium. And in my opinion, that committee failed the voters, failed their constituents, because this was supposed to be a reform of a very restrictive land use and development bill. And it did not get reformed. You can't call this reform in any way, shape, or form what came out.
Is this another bill? Are we waiting? We don't know what the governor is going to do. He hasn't made a decision on this also,
That's correct.
which should be happening in a day or two, apparently.
That's
But he didn't
correct.
sound like he was very happy with this bill.
No, I don't think his administration was very happy, because there were a number of reforms to the Act 250 law that would have been relevant and pertinent in this time. The original landmark bill was written 50 years ago. So much has changed in Vermont in 50 years. So I think that the bill that came to the floor about a year and a half ago, the original bill that was the reform bill was something like 109 pages. It was a long, big bill, and there were a number of areas that were very important that were touched on, but never in-depth vetted. And as Representative Fagard said, it was not indicative of good leadership coming out of that committee.
Daniel, any thoughts on Act 250? Seems like every election we hear about needing to
Unfortunately-
make changes to Act 250.
Unfortunately, I'm not up to date on my research on Act 250. The one thing I will say is I agree with them that the Vermont's changed in the last 50 years. Heck, it's changed in the last 15 years. I mean, Vermont's population's doubled, I believe, just about in the last 50 years. And
Well,
look
it's
at,
not doubling much these days.
oh,
but,
not nowadays, because it's more or less,
Pretty
it's
pretty
filled
stable.
up pretty
yeah.
well. But if you look even at St. Albans, you look at Highgate, it's definitely changed in the last 15 years. I mean, if you would have told me there was a Hilton Hotel and 2 microbreweries and 3 Chinese places in St. Albans, it's a miniature Burlington nowadays. And I think if any permitting needs to change to allow more Vermont to develop like that, then that's what we have to get done.
Speaking of kind of a local issue for Highgate more, but Franklin County State Airport expansion, is that like, I'm not sure that'll affect the legislature at all, but is that moving ahead? Is that an issue you paid some attention to?
Unfortunately, I don't know what's
Okay.
happening with that. I do know, if it's going forward, though, I am happy because that'll just help Highgate, that'll help the town. You can't, having a big airport, you can't really, there aren't too many negative consequences, being able to get bigger planes in there and.
Lisa, has that issue come up in
It
any
has.
legislative way?
Not in a legislative way, but I've attended a number of select board meetings in Highgate, and they have had presentations, and it is moving forward. There's a matching grant process that's happening.
And I guess Swantonville, I think they're extending what, water and
Yes,
sewer
the water and
lines out
sewer
there?
to from Swanton Village, so that it'll be continuous and it will benefit the airport. The main thrust of it is so that larger planes can land, and they can be, for instance, cargo planes. There could be warehouses that will service these planes, and the planes will then take the product out, and vice versa, bring product in. So it's nothing but economic boon for Franklin County, and I really do hope that nothing stands in its way. It's very exciting for Highgate to be involved in that.
Sharon, has that issue crossed your plate at all?
Yes, Representative Hango and I have both attended a number of meetings
Yeah.
about it, and it is exciting to have a different class of airplane come in that is carrying goods, and, you know, what we are looking at is the potential for warehouses and jobs, and for that to be a micro hub instead of having to go through expensive Burlington Airport. It's a great opportunity, and it just makes a lot of sense.
I'm hearing some rumblings of opposition today. You're not hearing too much opposition?
Nobody's reached out to me about it.
Yeah.
I do believe a couple years ago I did meet one person who didn't like the sound of airplanes, and I can understand that, but these are not going to be jets, they'll be prop.
No F-35s coming by, I don't think.
Well,
huh?
not even F-4 Phantoms.
Oh, yeah. Interesting.
If
Daniel?
there is the one issue that we did run into for Highgate is that Habitat for Humanity used to be based out of there for
And
years now.
Had to move.
Yeah, and it had to move out into Swanton, and a lot of people have struggled to get to the new location and find it, and it did create a bit of a mess because it seemed to happen overnight that they were just forced to get out of there. And
Yeah, you're right. They did have to move out of there. Your district, easy to think of border issues with Franklin-5, all 4 of your towns, border towns, where the border, now officially shut down till October 21, and I'd be stunned, especially the news out of Montreal, which I tend to monitor pretty closely. It sounds like Montreal's really going the wrong way at this point. So I got to think, I'd be stunned if the border opens up before the end of the calendar year, and who knows beyond that. But do you get many? There's obviously an impact in your district. Obviously, a number of folks with Quebec connections. That's got to be a real hardship for some folks.
It is. On Saturday, I was participating in a coin drop in Richford for the upcoming Harvest Fest on Sunday the 11th.
Oh, is that right?
Family-friendly event
Huh.
that I hope lots of people come to. But we noted that, you know, the Canadians who would have normally been driving through and dropping Canadian coins or whatnot, they weren't there. And it has had an impact on the communities and on families. I read an article recently that the Canadian snowbird population is really in a tough place, and that doesn't really impact us so much, but they can't get to Florida or Arizona where they usually winter. They don't even own winter clothing, and they can't bring their Winnebago across,
Right. Wow.
and they're stuck. This has been incredibly disruptive to an awful lot of people's lives.
And obviously for businesses, I mean, obviously there's significant convenience stores or whatever. And then in a normal year, especially summer, you think of Jay Peak, not just past your district,
Right.
but half their business, I think, is Montreal or Quebec.
Yes, but and at the same time, though, we've seen this boom in real estate. We've seen a lot of people coming from
Yeah.
other U.S. states
Right.
because they want to get away from the pandemic, from the densely populated areas. And
Yeah.
in fact, I think I read that Winhall, Vermont, has seen a huge increase, and their student population has gone up 25%,
Really?
which is about by 50 kids.
Wow.
So there are changes.
Yeah.
And it's going to be interesting to see how this sugars out, especially after these folks have been through a few winters.
Yeah. Lisa, again, you got obviously a number of your constituents, as we talked about, just absolutely impacted by the pandemic.
Yes, a number of my constituents have elderly relatives or extended family who live across the border. They've
Sure.
not been able to see each other. technically, you can see each other as long as you quarantine on either side of the border
That's
on
a-
your trip,
that's
but
the
that's
point.
not really
realistic
for many people. Our towns are seeing a decrease in the number of bicyclists who have come through in the summer, and that was a really big tourist draw for towns like Richford that had a big border crossing,
Yeah.
and they'd come through, and there is a route, the Route Vert
Well,
from
Route Vert, yeah.
Canada that came down and connected to the Missisquoi Valley Rail Trail. So all of that traffic, sometimes they saw 60 bikers at a time at the border. All of that traffic is completely shut down. As you mentioned, Jay Peak, I'm concerned for the upcoming winter ski season because I believe about 50% of the travelers who go to Jay Peak to ski are from Canada.
Yeah, I
and
think that's right.
if they lose that traffic, not only does the resort suffer, but the surrounding towns, and Richford is one of them, Richford and Berkshire,
Yeah.
that would benefit from people stopping at the quick stops or the little restaurants.
Not to mention, obviously, a number of your constituents who work at JP.
Absolutely, that's correct. So they are going to continue to be laid off from work if business is down. So it is affecting us tremendously. I know that there's a push by some senators from northern border states to ask the president and the prime minister to please get together to find a way to open the borders, but how you really can do that in the midst of a pandemic when numbers are rising,
Yeah.
does it really make sense to do that? The primary concern here is for health, but certainly the secondary concern is economic health.
Yeah, I hear Gary Douglas, a long time, I think, president, executive director of the Plattsburgh North Country Chamber of Commerce. It's a huge issue, of course, for Plattsburgh, but for a lot of folks. Daniel, is that an issue? You get people talking about just the border shutdown and what a factor that is?
Yeah, and I can tell you from personal experience because like
I suspect it's hurting you folks a bit, huh?
we Scampers, thankfully, because of the nature of the business, we've been
Yeah.
able to weather the storm kind of, but other places like Martin's, DeSorcy's Market and Highgate,
Yeah.
they used to get a lot of Canadians that passing through there. They used to get a lot of, I can only imagine how bad it was for the islands because the marinas,
Sure.
decent portions of those were either completely empty or
Yeah.
they had to lower the rates to be competitive.
Yeah.
It's been a hard year. Thankfully, the COVID money did a lot, and the kind of kept the economy afloat a little bit there. But for a lot of businesses, it was kind of the death nail. We've seen a lot of closures. We've seen a lot of just smaller places go under. So
Just out of curiosity, with your own business, your family's business, Scampers, are you down significantly business-wise, or not too much?
we're better than 2018, worse than 2019, I believe.
So you're hanging in okay?
Yeah. Well, thankfully, as children need clothes no matter what.
Right.
The real business that's been struggling is my dad's marina over in New York because large Canadian base, but he managed to fill it with New Yorkers and.
Of course, Lake Carmine's in your district, which unfortunately in recent years seems to have almost become the poster child for Vermont water quality problems. Is that an issue? Do you think the state's doing enough for Lake Carmine, for Lake Champlain on water quality issues? Do you hear much about that issue?
Unfortunately, I don't think the state's doing enough. We still have the snot, we still have the algae. It's getting, I don't think it might not be as bad as last year because just we've had kind of like a more mild. Maybe there's just less boaters out there have affected it, but it's not as picturesque as it was growing up.
Yeah. Lisa, how do you think the state? Are you reasonably satisfied with state, or for that matter, local efforts to try to improve Lake Carmine and Lake Champlain?
Yes, reasonably satisfied. I think all the research is telling us that it took 100 years to get this bad, so it's going to take quite a long time to get better. I have heard reports, particularly from Lake Carmine, that things have gotten a little bit better in comparison to the year before, but it's very incremental, it's small. It will take a long time. I think people in town are encouraged that the state was willing to identify it as a lake in crisis and do something about that. So the aerators went in last year, and that was a really big investment. And it got a lot of publicity, and I think we just need to wait and keep up the efforts and wait to see how it pans out.
Yeah, of course, you not only have Lake Carmine in your district, but also
Lake Champlain.
Missisquoi Bay as well.
Yeah.
Sharon, what do you think? Do you think, again, just as has been noted, this may take decades, who knows how long, but are we on the right path, do you think?
We
Maybe
are on the
finally?
right path.
Yeah.
You know, it would be great if we could get some more manure injectors out there. There's a lot of injection going on, but there's still some spreading. But the farmers have stepped up, and the RIPs have played a big role in radically reducing the amount of phosphorus going to the lake. But it's going to take time, and hotter temperatures increase the problem. And you know, the last 3 summers we've had some pretty high temps.
Yep, you're right about that. In fact, I'm kind of a weather guy. I can report Burlington had 20 90s this summer, 90 or above temperatures, second only to 1949, which for whatever reason was a hot year. But yeah, a lot of 90s. It was another pretty hot summer.
I spent many days in Phoenix in August with record-breaking
Really?
temperatures,
Wow.
lows around 91, highs above 110.
Oh, was that a little drier heat out that way, but still.
Like a pizza oven.
Is that right?
Like a pizza
Interesting.
oven.
Wow. Now, what about, boy, dairy taking a tremendous hit? I mean, boy, what the last good times for dairy were maybe, 5 or 6 years ago in terms of
Yes.
prices, but
Right.
where the pandemic is, again, number of dairy farms going out. Of course, I think one of the biggest dairy farms in the state is in Berkshire, but again, continuing tough
The
times
biggest.
for dairy.
Yeah, the biggest, not just in the state,
Is
but in
that-
the region.
Oh,
Yes.
is that right? The
Yeah, Pleasant
biggest?
Valley.
Wow.
Yes. You know, they've been, our farmers have been so hardworking and so resilient, and I've
Yeah.
been watching, you know, attempts to make sure that people are not lacking for dairy in their diet, you
Yeah.
know, the donations to make sure that families that are food insecure have access to milk and other processed or value-added dairy products like cheese. And this is really hard, and unfortunately, our largest dairy farm in the region is nothing compared to the size of dairy farms out west. And
Yeah.
so, you know, we don't have the clout to force leverage, but, you know, the dairy farmers are doing their best to hang in there. And yeah, we were looking at an expected uptick in fluid milk prices, and COVID absolutely
Killed.
annihilated that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Boy, tough time. Lisa,
Yes.
you also, dairy, you hear from some of your dairy constituents. Again, boy, good luck if they're hanging in there. We've lost just a number of dairy farms, but tough times. Any bright spots here, or not too many?
I think the ones that are still here are hanging in, and they're, as Representative Fegard said, they're working really hard. I think that I was a little disappointed in how the CRF, the Coronavirus Relief Funds, were dispersed to farmers in general, to agriculture. It wasn't as much money as we were hoping that they would get. And I would really like to see more investment put into farmers who are getting out of dairy and to diversify to other types of agriculture, because that farming isn't just a product, it's a way of life. And a lot of farmers, once they lose their dairy operation, don't know where else to go or what else to do with their lives.
Right.
And the reason that they were farmers is because they like to work the land. So my dream, if I could have my dream come true, is to have support for those farmers who are going out of dairy or any other type of farming that may not be doing well at this point in time, and be able to diversify and add value to their products and be supported by programs from the state and the federal government, to be honest with you. One of the saddest things to see was when COVID shut everything down, farmers dumping milk.
Boy, dumping milk, those stories are really painful.
And can
Yeah,
I add that the Farmers to Families program
Yeah.
that Vermont has done a tremendous job with,
It's Right.
the feds have decided to move that from in-state to
I saw that. The Abbey, of
Boston.
course, had a
Yeah.
big contract and they
Right,
moved it to
so-
a Massachusetts firm, I think.
And every civilization that has survived has had
Um,
agriculture that was flexible, they had food sovereignty, and here we are yet again with a federal model that is taking local control and local access away.
Yeah. Boy, that sounded like a surprising, yeah, I know that
Yeah.
seemed to catch the state, another congressional delegation. Guess nobody was happy about that.
Right, right. Yes, it's
Interesting.
unfortunate, and I can't really figure out how they can justify it.
Yeah. Daniel, do you hear much about just dairy industry woes? Does that come across your plate?
Well,
much?
like many of you may not know, we used to have a dairy farm.
Really?
Half a
As in
decade.
your family?
Yes, about half a decade ago, but it went under.
Oh.
Milk prices just dropped too low, and
Wow.
since then we haven't been too involved because it's just too depressing when you
Yeah.
think about it. And sadly, the COVID was kind of the death nail for a lot of those smaller, and the ones that were still hanging around, but now it's just the big for Vermont, I should say.
Difficult times. We're down to just a couple minutes. How about I'll give you roughly a minute each. Make your case, Sharon. Why should folks send you back to Montpelier for a second term?
Well, I wasn't expecting that question, Richard.
Again, you had obviously as tough as it's been, and what a strange year. I mean, in terms of
Strange
campaigning and
year,
stuff,
yeah.
but I can only assume more positives than negatives, and you'd like to hang in there.
I would say that in this time, the leadership and the healing that communities need is not going to come from the national dialogue or the national level, and that
That's no joke.
we need people who are able to look at issues in depth rather than doing bumper sticker politics. And that's probably one of my biggest assets, is simply asking around and wanting to know the different perspectives on things,
Yeah.
rather than simply waving a flag, be it blue or red, and saying, well, I'm with the team. And I think that's really important.
Very good. Lisa, it sounds like, again, in your almost full first term, but looking for your first election, sounds like you've gotten into this. You enjoy the work, and you'd like a couple more years of this.
I do, and that's correct. And I think you alluded earlier to COVID being putting the damper on campaigning, and that's really true for us because we just barely finished our legislative session. We weren't really out, we weren't even supposed to be out campaigning. We were focusing on trying to help Vermont start to recover from the COVID economic and health crisis.
And door-to-door campaigning, I mean, forget it. I mean,
And
that's just not happening.
I'm not doing that. I have chosen to do very little in-person campaigning because we're an older aging state,
Yeah.
and there are a lot of older people with health conditions, underlying health conditions, that to go door to door, I don't want to expose anyone. So back to why people should return me to the State House. I really feel that consistency is important here. I feel like we started this crisis together. I think just by the relationships that I've made within the House of Representatives and the Senate and with the people in the administration, the governor's administration, I feel like I can work with just about anybody. There's probably not too many people that I can't work with. And I think that's really important in these times. I really feel that consistency and the ability to reach across the aisle and have a dialogue with folks who may not believe the same things as me, but come out on the other side of that with some kind of a solution is very important.
Okay, Daniel, you'd like a shot at this. You'd like to get down to Montpelier. What's your, very quickly, why should folks send you down there?
Basically, I'd toe the party line. Unlike Sharon, I'm not afraid or ashamed to call myself a Democrat. I'd stick with the policies and, be happy to carry that blue flag that she was talking about. I wouldn't flip flop. If our national politics have taught us anything, is there's a lot more divide in the parties than there is keeping us together.
Very good. On that note, thanks to Daniel Nadeau, Democratic candidate from Highgate, Representative Lisa Hango, Berkshire Republican, Democratic Rep Sharon Fagard, a Berkshire Democrat, and again also on the ballot, Paul Martin, a Franklin Republican. Thanks for watching us. Thanks to all the folks doing the hard work out there, and we'll see you again. See ya. Thanks.